All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everyone has had a great start to their new year. You are joining us for Apparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights, and we are excited to kick off this webinar series of 2024 around marketing. So we have our amazing marketing team joining us today from Apparo. This is a three-part series. So today we will start with kind of a high-level intro, and then the next couple of webinars will dive into other topics within marketing. We have Bleema Bershad, Apparo's very own Director of Marketing, leading this series. Today we are also joined by other members of our marketing team as well. But before I turn it over to their very capable hands, a few housekeeping details. So all of our webinars are recorded and they are posted up to our YouTube channel as well as our website. However, all of you who are attending today, you will receive a follow-up email from me. It'll include the link to the recording as well as a copy of this slide deck. At your toolbar, it should look something like this on my screen. Zoom may have changed a little bit, but you should still have a chat box as well as a Q&A. Now, there's quite a few of you joining us, so if you can drop in your questions in the Q&A, it'll just help us make sure that we don't miss your questions and help us organize. Chat box is available for you to use as well. Please use that to drop in your comments, share your stories, anything you'd like, provide us feedback. There is also a reactions button. We'd love to see reactions, so feel free to play around with that as well. So really quickly, for those of you who are new to Apparo, so we are a nonprofit. We are based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And what we do is we help other nonprofits with their technology challenges. And we do that by connecting nonprofits with corporations and skilled volunteers. And together as a team, we help support those nonprofits so that they can focus on amplifying their impact in the communities and populations that they serve. Now you can see here we offer a wide range of services, and this is to make sure that we're meeting your needs. If you'd like to learn more about our services, the best way is to go to our website at apparo.org and just explore. And if you do have any questions about those services, don't hesitate to ask us. So these are the various ways to connect with us. If or when you decide you'd like to access any of our services, you can go to our website and submit a request. You can also subscribe to our email list. This will help you stay updated on our programming. I will also share my email address. You can feel free to email me. I'll be happy to support you and help you. And then finally, if you do like what we do, please consider writing a short Google review. All right, that is it for me. I am going to stop sharing and go ahead and turn it over to Bleema.
Thank you, Yanting. Okay, I'm going to do my screen share magic here. 1 second. All right, perfect. Thank you. Well, Yanting, thank you for that introduction that you gave to me. Lauren and Alyssa, thank you for joining me and supporting me here. Could you quickly introduce yourselves, please? Lauren, do you want to start?
Yes, I'm Lauren Green. I'm the Events and Marketing Associate at Apparo, and I work for the marketing team of Bleema and Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Maynard. I'm on our marketing team. I'm PR and marketing coordinator. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you both for joining me. And as Yanting said, please do put questions into the Q&A and into the chat. So I want to make sure that I'm delivering information that's really useful. So as she said, I'm Bleema Bershad, the Director of Marketing at Apparo. I am very fortunate that for the past 10 plus years, I've been able to, as I like to say, use my marketing powers for good. I love nonprofit marketing. It means the world to me that I have this job and this role, and I appreciate being able to share some of that with all of you today. So this webinar is about how marketing can be woven into all the work that's done across across the nonprofit to help push your mission forward. And so if you're wondering if you're in the right place, sometimes you sit in a webinar and wonder, like, is this really for me? I want to say that this presentation is really meant for you, even if you are a marketer, woohoo, or just like a marketer. Am I a marketer? So whether you're one person on a marketing team, a member of a bigger team, or maybe someone who doesn't have any marketing support at all, but you know marketing is important and you want to figure out how to weave it into your work. This presentation is for you. I want to take a couple of seconds just to level set, to talk about the difference between fundraising and marketing. A lot of organizations, in a lot of nonprofits, these are blended. And I feel very fortunate at Apparo that we have a development team and a marketing team that are separate. But I just want to make sure that the definitions are very, very clear. Fundraising, or sometimes also called development, is about driving nonprofit revenue. Some of the ways that's done is through individual giving, just people who are donating money, corporate engagement, corporate giving, grants. Marketing is different because it's cross-functional. So marketing support is broader across your nonprofit, but it's less deep. It's broader because it supports the goals of the whole organization. It's not just for fundraising, but it's less deep. It's not all things in any one department. So speaking of supporting the goals of the whole organization, let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about 6 ways in which marketing can help you meet your specific nonprofit goals. And as Yansing said in the introduction, this is part 1. This is meant to be an overview, and it is high level. The next deep dives are coming. The structures of the next presentations are similar to this one. They're going to be deep dives with examples into volunteers and into corporate engagement. So if you're interested in another deep dive, please, when Yenting sends you the survey, please put that into the survey and we can do deep dives into any of the topics that we talk about today, whether through our internal expertise or through other marketing experts. So I would say when it comes to these 6 things, you may already be doing a lot of this and not realizing that this is marketing. Everything that follows is marketing, and it's something you can work on your own or with your marketing team. So we're going to start today talking about deepening insights. You already know a lot about your constituents, but we're going to talk about the importance of learning even more and how to go about it. And what do I mean by constituents? Because the presentation is broad, I mean anyone who you need to communicate with and influence. So that can be a volunteer, a current volunteer, a potential volunteer, a current donor, a potential donor. For example, anyone you need to influence. Segmenting constituents we'll continue to talk about. Like, yes, you can apply the same strategies to meet your goals across your whole audience, but segmentation makes your work more focused and more effective. Copywriting. So this is the language you use to explain and to motivate. By fine-tuning programs and benefits, I'm going to talk about the small adjustments, hopefully low-hanging fruit that you can, and tweaks that you can handle to deliver things that may optimize engagement with the people that you want to be engaging with. Delivering the goods, also known as the stuff. These are things you need when you're out there, out in the digital world and out in the physical world, and then bringing it all together, creating marketing plans and marketing campaigns. So let's get started with deepening insights. So I want to start talking about deepening insights first, because I think it's the most important and the most fundamental. A lot of the work you are doing right now is based on a mix of learned insights and assumptions. And it's probably working very well for you because you know a lot in your role. But if you can deepen your knowledge of your constituents, you can fine-tune the way you work to be more efficient and more impactful. So I would suggest starting by just brainstorming with your team or yourself what would be helpful to know. And these are some suggestions. Your list might look very different. So how do your constituents benefit from your relationship? And the benefit, everyone benefits, or they wouldn't engage with you. So clearly the people you serve in the community benefit from your services, but your donors benefit, your volunteers benefit. in theory, feel really great about supporting you, and that's a benefit. What's their experience with your nonprofit? Talk to them, learn about engagement with you and how that's working. What motivates them to act? And, some people are more motivated by metrics and numbers, whereas others are much more motivated by a great heartstringy story. Some people are motivated by praise. So some people want to be the center of attention. So figuring that out is important. What's their language? What are the buzzwords that they're using? And you want to reflect that back to them. How did they find you? So knowing what channels they use to find you can help you figure out where you want to invest. Did they find you via social media? Maybe you want to do social media advertising. Did they find you through a certain club? Maybe that's a club you want to partner with or think about a sponsorship. Where can they be found? Similarly, are there clubs that they belong to, events that they go to, professional organizations, social media channels that they really enjoy? When you learn these, you can figure out where to focus your efforts. And what are some of their distinguishing characteristics? Where are they in age, career stage, education? Knowing this can also help you figure out where to find them and how to fine-tune some of your communications. So then you'll have a list of what you'd love to know. And chances are that some of this information, hopefully a lot of it, is readily accessible. So next, you become the detective. What answers do you already have in your organization and what's missing? So you will assess the existing information in your organization. Things might just be hiding in plain sight and need to be organized and then synthesized. You've got a list of things you want to know. Talk to your existing staff. Try to extract knowledge. And then it's harder work, but go through your surveys, go through your forms, and think about, do I have answers to these questions already? Am I already collecting them? Synthesize this, pull these together and see, and this is how you're going to identify your knowledge gaps. We really want to know this, and we're just simply not collecting data around this. How can we do it? Once you have clarity around what will still be useful to know, you can plan to fill those knowledge gaps and fill them. Some of the ways that you can do that, you can build into your existing processes. So chances are you're probably already using surveys and forms in some way. Some questions may need tweaks, surveys may need overhauls, but it's worth the effort because these touch points are already built into your processes. So I'll share a couple examples and let me know if I should share some more if you have some other ideas. But one of the things that we balance when we write surveys is multiple choice questions versus open-ended questions. And an open-ended question just lets a person type in that text box. But when they do that, and it's harder to consolidate, right? The multiple choice questions, it's really easy to put your data together. But when you do have open-ended questions, you can start to hear some of the language and the terms and the buzzwords that people are using. So if you want to, for example, it's very easy when you're rating, not easy, but sometimes it's obvious to use like a 1 through 5 scale for rating satisfaction for interacting with you. But if you ask an open-ended question in a survey, like, how would you describe interacting with us to a friend? You may be able to collect some of that language. So another example is around those distinguishing characteristics. You may have traditional demographic questions you always ask in your survey. Take a look in that section. It may be easy just to add a couple more questions to extract a few more details that can help you fine-tune some of your outreach. Think about your touch points. Every time you're connecting with your constituents, whether you're calling them for a check-in, you're having a meeting, you're having an event, you have a class, you have a registration form. These touch points are spots where you may not be thinking about surveys or extracting data, but may be able to slip in a question depending on what it is. I would be careful. You want people to do what you need them to do, but it may be an okay spot to ask a question. One great question that I love anytime I see an Apparo form that I want to encourage the team to ask is to ask people if they want to subscribe to our email. Can we please just add in that one question? So that's one where you're not really learning, you're not extracting not insights, but you're bolstering a communication point. So, and then in terms of filling knowledge gaps, there are some things that you may have to do simply for information gathering. Those can be focus groups, they can be one-on-one interviews. At Apparo, we do a lot of one-on-one interviews. And we choose to go that route because while it does take our time, it's much less expensive than bringing a group of people together in a venue. If you may not have access to a great venue, and juggling people's schedules and the administration work can be hard to bring together a focus group. But focus groups are great when you want to bring a group of people together to brainstorm and come up with new ideas when you think they'll build off of each other. Depending on the work of your nonprofit, if the work is more private and you do want to talk to people separately, one-on-one interviews are great. Whereas volunteers may be wonderful to bring together in a group and build off of each other. So, and then it's an ongoing process. The marketing work never stops. So once you think about how you're filling these knowledge gaps, think about how you're going to be collecting data and refreshing the insights you need over time. So I would say these insights are fundamental to everything that follows in this presentation. They make it possible for us to improve the impact of our outreach through segmentation, through the language we use, and through the rest of it. So I'll talk about segmentation next. Based on the insights that we
Bleema?
get. Yeah,
Sorry, we do have a quick question.
yeah, please.
About those touch points. So how can we determine which touch points to use for marketing the nonprofit?
So that's a great question. I would say that every touch point is a marketing opportunity. Whether it's an opportunity to build your brand, whether it's an opportunity to ask a quick question. When you're doing your actual, and it's tough without being able to talk to the person asking this question, when you're doing the actual work of your client service, direct service work, depending on the work that you're doing, it may not be the best that may not be appropriate. But I would say outside of that, everything goes. Whether it's a quick question, whether it's you giving a pitch at the beginning of a meeting, at the beginning of this webinar, Yenting gives a pitch about Apparo. We do a survey right after every one. So I'm not certain I've fully answered the question, and I welcome you to send me an email and we can talk about it. We can talk about it a little bit more.
Bleema, I'm also wanted to ask if you had any advice on how to balance those survey forms. So I know we balanced the multiple choice and open-ended questions, but are there specific questions that you think are good for being open-ended and certain ones that are better for multiple choice?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the multiple choice questions so that you can consolidate data over time. When the more you let people write, the more work it puts on your plate to read it, assess it, consolidate it. So I would say, the rule of thumb for us is typically our surveys are about 80% multiple choice questions, maybe 20% open-ended questions. And I would choose open-ended questions that encourage people to talk about their relationship with you. You may get amazing quotes that you can then use to attract constituents, which we'll talk more about later. And you'll get language that you can build into your website and into other communication points. Thank you for asking. Great. So after you've collected insights, and this is a continuous process. And if you don't feel like you've completely accomplished that, that's okay. We're going to talk about segmentation. It's something that you can do based on the knowledge at your fingertips. So to segment means to categorize or to group people together who are alike in ways that are meaningful, in ways that you can act upon to meet your goals. It matters because treating everyone in exactly the same way can work, but it's not the optimally efficient way to achieve your goals. So let's use fundraising as an example. You can do one campaign to reach everyone, the same email, the same language, the same social media posts, but maybe and hopefully while you were pulling your insights together and gathering new insights, you discovered and this is very oversimplifying, but I'm going to oversimplify for the purpose of the example. You discovered two groups of current donors who have distinct characteristics and distinct motivators. So you discovered during your work that you have a contingent of younger donors. They love to volunteer with you. They care deeply about having the greatest impact possible, and they're very active on Instagram. You also discovered you have another group of older donors who don't volunteer with you. They're very, very motivated by an invitation to your major donor event, and they're not very active on social media. So these two groups meet the definitions of good segments. They're distinct, their characteristics are distinct, their motivators are distinct, and you can target them. You can target them distinctly. So one of the things you might want to think about doing differently for each of your segments is to think about how to speak to them. And we'll talk about copywriting here, or the language that you use. And anything when it comes to writing, the bang for the buck is great here, because they're just verbiage tweaks, right? If you research them and feel confident about them, go for it. And this is a spot where search engine optimization can come into play also. Alyssa, thank you very much, has written a great manual for us, which actually we could potentially share, right? We could share that for our blog posts, and how to weave language in that is appealing to our audiences. Google, whether you're using Google Ad Grant or not, you can use Google Keyword Planner to do some research. You've heard your constituents using some language, and you can play around in there with phrases and see, are people actually searching these phrases? We keep a spreadsheet of keyword phrases that we build in when we're writing. So sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but assess the language that you're using in your current communication channels. Yes, it's important in marketing to have one brand voice, but it doesn't mean you have to use every channel in exactly the same way. So for example, you can be a little bit more informal in social media than in a printed brochure, for example. And I know Lauren, there was a question that was submitted ahead of time, and Lauren runs all of our social media, around using social media channels. And I know you apply strategies to use them differently.
That's correct. For LinkedIn, we're going to be a little bit more formal and professional in the way we're presenting our post. But when we go to Instagram, we can be a little bit more creative to try to reach the different segments of constituents.
Thank you. And then consider how to fine tune your language based on your goals. If there's something very specific you want people to do, I need you to apply. I need you to submit this. I need you to buy this ticket. It's very important that that ask is very clear and that the instructions make sense. And this is a great spot to just get feedback from people who are not mired in it, other people in your organization, a friend, whomever it is. Ideally, it's someone who you're targeting, but if you can't, it's okay. Fresh perspective means a lot there. And then assess the motivation by segment, as it's possible. That you have some communication channels that speak to everyone, but maybe you have pages on your website that speak to a specific audience. Maybe you have a brochure that speaks to a specific audience. So going back in my very simple example of the two potential segments we identified, those younger volunteers who are already donating, if I want to motivate them to donate, maybe I can say amplify your good, because they're already doing good. And, for example, and then the folks who I've discovered really want to be celebrated and want to come to that event, I may use language like be honored as we celebrate your impact. So language is not the only thing that you can fine tune. You can also make ideally very small changes. So I have the word benefits in quotes here because it's tricky. I don't mean your programming fundamentals, the work you do in client services or direct service. What I mean is the things you do for your volunteers, your donors, your corporate partners as shows of appreciation for them, where you list your names, the events you invite them to, gifts you give them. So hopefully based on your insight gathering, you may find opportunities to fine tune some of these to appeal more deeply to what motivates them. And hopefully these are small, realistic tweaks. It's important to discuss very openly with whomever you're working on this. What are the non-negotiables? What are you willing to tweak and what are you not willing to tweak? So for example, if you hear from your audience, and we hear it sometimes at Apparo, like, ooh, an appetite for another event. And that to us, could be a non-negotiable because of bandwidth. We may not be able to add another event, or if people want like, oh, I would love like a really beautiful sweatshirt. It might be a little expensive to provide that. So that may not be a non-negotiable, but hopefully that there are some really small, realistic adjustments that you can make in benefits. So going back to my segment example, maybe you learned that those younger donors, the ones who are also your volunteers, they don't like their name on a list. They don't like that. They prefer more direct private appreciation. Like they might like to just have a certificate that can be over their shoulder in a frame so people see it on a Zoom call and engage in them in conversation to ask them what that's about. And maybe those older donors, the ones who really like going to an event, maybe they're starting to get like a little bit black tied out. Maybe they would like every other year to have a brunch. And maybe that would be an adjustment that's not so hard for you to make. So as you're working on fine-tuning your language, fine-tuning the benefits, when you're out in the world, virtually and actually physically, you need a toolkit. And there you are, Alyssa.
Before we get into that, Bleema,
Yes,
we do have a
please.
couple questions that came through around the language.
Yes.
So one question is, how do you balance segmenting your language by audience without losing authenticity?
Yeah, and I like that question a lot. I think about authenticity a lot when it comes to search engine optimization. And Lauren and Alyssa, please chime in because we face this a lot when we're writing. We do a lot of one-on-one interviews and we write a lot of blog posts based on that. And sometimes I do feel inauthentic trying to put in those keywords. And I don't know if Alyssa and Lauren, if you agree.
I agree with you, Bleema. Sometimes it feels harder to work those keywords in and make it sound like your own voice and your authentic voice, I think.
One thing that helps me is because we've spent time doing keyword research, some of the keywords are really easy. They're words that feel very natural to include for us, like nonprofit impact or amplifying nonprofit impact, things like that, that we know resonate with our audience, are used a lot. And there are, in terms of search engine optimization, you don't want to use them a million times anyway. You want to use them, Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
Throughout a blog post, for example, or a website page. It's the same. We do a lot of blog posting, but it's the same for your website pages. But there definitely is a balance. And if you work, sometimes we had this experience experimenting, working with an SEO firm, pushing us to like jam those keywords in there, and it did not feel right. So I do completely understand what you're saying. It's finding those keywords and phrases that feel really natural. And sometimes what you can also do is use a testimonial. So it's a quote and it's actually something that a volunteer said or a donor said or one of your direct service recipients said, and then it's in their voice and it's non-disputable. It is authentic as it gets. Did you say you had 2 questions, Yanjing?
Yes, the second question is, how can we determine what language to use as far as nonprofit communication channels are concerned?
So we're gonna dive into channels a little bit more. But generally speaking, I do believe you can think about one brand voice. There are persona type exercises that marketers go through when they're working on branding. Just share like what the voice and what the tone of their organization is. So at Apparo, we try to be professional but warm, which is a very, very high level, but we give ourselves breath with that. So as Lauren said, in some social media channels, we're a little bit more playful and a little bit more informal. And in LinkedIn, we're much more professional. In a printed brochure, I would be much more professional, but it's knowing, it's really knowing, it's hard to answer this at a very high level. It's about knowing your audience, and I welcome having a more detailed conversation about that.
Thanks, Bleema.
Yeah,
Just wanted
absolutely.
to share the response. Thank you for acknowledging how hard this is to balance. Love the idea of a testimonial. Thank you for your answer.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is hard for me. I like one-on-one conversations. Okay. So, oh, and yes, and I said, there's Alyssa. So, this is the stuff, the goods, the stuff. So these are the things that you need in your toolkit. Having these things ready makes your life easier. It's an investment of time and an investment of money to get these things organized, but it will stop you from scrambling. You're about to go to an event, you have a speaking engagement, something is going on, and you're thinking about creating or recreating. And it also delivers a more professional image. It makes you look like you have your act together. So, I really believe that these are the fundamentals, and maybe your team can do it. Some of this is going to need to be outsourced, and you know, it does cost money. It is an investment, and you know, we do not have a gigantic marketing budget, so I can relate to that. I do, speaking of not having a gigantic marketing budget, want to do a little pitch here about website assessment. Your website pages are very, very important. I feel a lot of times people ask me and our marketing team, I need a flyer for this, I need a one-pager for this. And I try as often as possible to say, are you sure you can't direct people back to the website? We have a beautiful donation page. We have detailed descriptions of our volunteer opportunities and so forth. And having that built into your website will save you from having to create one-off flyers and brochures. But I wanted to pitch, Apparo does have a free website user experience assessment. So if you are interested in having skilled volunteers review your website with wearing the hat or the mindset of specific constituents, which you can let us know, please scan this QR code and you can sign up for it. We have volunteers ready who are enthusiastic to do this with you and to give you really useful, actionable feedback. So we talked about, and you're going to get this presentation, so you'll have that code in there also. Email templates are another one. Often we find ourselves shooting off like the same, didn't I write this email? Didn't I write this email already? Having a template, and it doesn't mean anything fancy. It could be an email that you save in your sent and you have it flagged and you just revise it. But so that you have the language optimized, it makes life easier for you. You know, anything that you do often, you're announcing a new event, you're thanking a volunteer, you're thanking a donor, any regular communications can benefit from that. Presentation templates, it's the same thing, whether you're doing it in PowerPoint or Canva, wherever you're doing it. And again, it doesn't have to be like a fancy template. It can just be one that you save, and you save a copy and revise it. But here, if they're branded, they have consistent fonts, consistent logos, consistent graphics, it makes your life easier and it looks more professional. And sometimes, despite all my efforts to send people back to the website, for some reason, sometimes we really do need one-pagers. We need to print them out. We need to bring them to an event, or someone asks for, there are some people who just really like a one-pager or a flyer, and that's fine. And Canva is fantastic for creating these. And what you can do when you do create them in Canva is you can grab some a line of embed code, and you can embed it into your blog or your website so that it lives there also, which we do all the time. And brochures, branded items, swag, and swag does not have to be expensive. People like pens. And sometimes when you're thinking about what you're going to bring to events, people come to tables because they want candy. And we keep a stock of candy. So signage, that's where we have our little Apparo banner here, draws attention. Tabletop items for events. We keep it organized. We have a wagon in our closet, and we pull our banners. We put QR codes into picture frames. We have an Apparo tablecloth, and we have it ready to go. And I do I hope you agree, Lauren and Alyssa. Yenting, I'm not, you've also represented Apparo at events, that having that stuff organized just makes life easier.
Absolutely.
So
A couple
yeah,
questions, oh,
please.
yeah, a couple questions on this particular topic. We have a question around the swag. So what is the true value of swag? We go back and forth on how much to actually invest or spend on that.
Well, I would go back to, gathering insights, section 1, and I would ask your constituents if they care, your volunteers, your donors. I would say for us, our volunteers really like to advocate for Apparo, and I would include our board members in that. They like to be proud, and I do believe there's value there because they spread the word. And it really can be a pen. It doesn't have to be a t-shirt. It can be something very small. Our repeat volunteers, we have a very simple little zippered bag that we open that's mailable, and our volunteer manager mails that to repeat volunteers. And we hope they carry it around with their pencils and things like that. It fits, it's big enough for a Kindle. So I think the value is if it builds advocacy for you. That I think is the number one thing. I find that donors sometimes feel like, oh, I wish you had not wasted your money on something like that. But the volunteers and board members tend to really like it. For us, but I would ask your audience, but focus primarily on advocacy if it's going to build it. Was that?
Thanks.
Okay,
And then we
yeah.
have another question. What does one pagers look like?
So one, and I'm sorry to use, if I'm using lingo, it's any kind of a flyer. So we can share some of ours and links to some of ours in the blog. Yenting, can I send you some for
Absolutely.
follow-up? But
Yes.
they look like a flyer. So they would have a big header and a big call to action on the bottom telling people how to contact and how to reach out. We use them at Apparo to promote upcoming events sometimes. So for example, we have an event coming up in April that is an event for some of our corporate sponsors. And this is a flyer that explains what the sponsorship opportunities are. The reason we have it as a flyer is so that we can bring it to an event, bring it to physically to events, and hope people will grab them. We tend to put QR codes on these to make it very actionable also, like zap it and it sends an email or it takes you to a very easy form. And we, for the most part, any one pager or flyer that we have, we do embed into our blog. We have a WordPress blog, and that way the content is not only in the physical world, it's in the digital world. Good. Okay. So that covers what I consider to be the basics. And now I'm going to talk about putting it all together. So marketing plans and campaigns are where it all really comes together. What you've learned, the adjustments you've made, your goals. What's the difference? A plan is a plan. It's an ongoing plan of attack. What are we doing on a weekly basis? What are we doing regularly in social media? What are we doing in our quarterly magazine? Ongoing. Campaigns are short-term. They have a start date, they have an end date. Marketing plans may have many campaigns in them. I tend to accidentally call one the other, but this is what I mean. And this is my favorite part of my job. So Lauren and Alyssa may always, why does Bleema always write the marketing plans? I love to write the marketing plans. If I could have like a picture of myself, and we just do these in spreadsheets, literally in spreadsheets. So with a start date and an end date, and we have cells equal cells to build in contingencies. There are much more sophisticated ways and complex ways to do this. And it's actually something we're talking about at Apparo, is how to shift some of our marketing plans and other event planning and things into other tools. So we, are trying to drink our own Kool-Aid here and practice what we preach, but spreadsheets for marketing plans are working well for us right now. And it's really just about getting in front of the right people with the right message. But the first step in planning is determining the goals you have and you need to fulfill. So because this presentation is a very high level, I'm going to talk about them more generally, but the deep dive presentations will really focus much more on next week on volunteers and the following week on corporate engagement. So for example, if you are in direct service, your goal, the main goal is around, that I would talk about first, and this is just an example, is around attracting new constituents. So it may be more people to serve, more donors, more corporate partners, more volunteers, depending on who you are and what your goal is. Each of these would be a very different campaign. And you'd want to make sure you build into your marketing plan getting in front of the right people with the right message, the segments that we talked about before, language that's going to appeal to them. Is it metrics? Is it heartstrings? Am I using the right words? Benefits that are going to speak to them, clarity on what you expect. Use a strong call to action. So I've made reference to call to action before. It's very simply, what are you asking people to do? Ask them to do it in a really simple way. If it's digital, it's one click. There's no rabbit holes. This is the one button I want you to press. Press this one button, and it takes you right to the place where you want them to be as quickly as possible. Fish in your own pond. What do I mean by that? We're talking about attracting new constituents, but some people may already have one relationship with you, and it could grow to another relationship. Volunteers can become donors. Donors could become volunteers. Anyone who's connected with you in any way could open a door to a corporate partnership. Another goal could be retaining your current constituents. So in direct service, that would mean people stick with your program to completion. It could mean that they return for additional services as appropriate. In terms of fundraising, it can mean that your donors and corporate partners continue to support you year after year. And it is so much easier to retain than to attract someone new. So that's a really important one. And it applies to volunteers also. That effort to bring that first person in the door is so much harder than keeping them. But keeping them happy can also be very hard. Some things that you're going to want to, when it comes to retention, built into your marketing plan is to celebrate people the way they want to be celebrated, which is why we talked about that in gathering insights. Share the metrics or share the heartstring stories. Make them feel like a really important part of your success and a valued part of your nonprofit family. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit. If they value it, and it will drive advocacy and it will drive retention, swag, parties, and so forth. And again, they don't have to be expensive. We do a very fun, very low-key annual volunteer appreciation event at a brewery that donates their space to us. You know, we spend in the three figures to throw this event, and our volunteers love it. They get to network with each other, and it doesn't take a lot of effort for us to plan. So that's one example. So the good news I'll share is that attraction goals and retention goals and in your efforts against these really spill over into each other, because the community, everyone sees everything that you're doing. So when you're putting stories out there to try to attract, you're going to be talking about someone who already worked with you, and it may help retain them when you're working, you know, and vice versa. So once you know the goals you'd like to accomplish, the work of putting a marketing plan together begins. And you have many decisions to make when you're putting together a marketing plan. These are some that I wanted to highlight. What channels will you use? What language will you use in those channels? And how will you determine if you were effective? So channels. You know, as you consider channels and actually all of these decisions, it's important to keep your segments in mind. You're going to likely, your goals, your segments, you can't do all things for all people. So as focused and as narrow as you can get on a goal is important. In terms of channels, go back to those insights and your own knowledge of where they find you, what media they consume, which social media channels they use, what events they attend, and so those things that we talked about before. When it comes to channels, there's three main channels that I tend to think about. Digital, you have a plethora of digital choices. You can do digital, I mean, obviously there's social media, but you can do digital ads in different communications. And some of them are really not, some of the local publications, some of the banner ads are not that, I mean, it depends on your budget, of course, but they can be affordable and they can potentially drive traffic back to a specific call to action at your website. There's Google Ad Grant, and we I do believe we have educational content on that, or it can certainly help direct you to some. And that is, that's free, but does take a lot of work on your nonprofit part to manage. In person, so identifying the right events to attend, it's a really important part of marketing. You want to get in front of the right people, establish your reputation, and then you bring along those goods that we talked about. People is one of my favorite channels to think about strategically. And Alyssa does a lot of this for us, the people thinking. So chime in if I missed anything, but one of the, we think about, can we attract media to this event? Who are people who will advocate for us? How do we encourage them to advocate for us? Sometimes people just need to be asked. They already really like you and maybe are not telling your story to other people simply because you haven't asked them to. And then other organizations out there, for us, we're a capacity building nonprofit. We look for other nonprofits that serve nonprofits to help spread the word about the work that we do. And we believe that, we grow the pie here, that the more we can do to spread the word about our work, we'll spread the word about your work, and we're not cannibalizing each other. How'd I do, Alyssa? Okay.
You did great. Yeah.
Okay, good. And, thinking about timing is really important. You want to make sure your channels are working together synergistically. So what are you doing in your newsletter? What are you doing in social media? Do you have an ad out there somewhere? And are all of these things complementing each other very nicely through the course of a week, through the course of a month? There's probably a lot going on in your channels. And it's one of the things that we certainly face at Apparo, because we have many different audiences, many different campaigns going on at the same time. So just keeping track of what communications are out there. Again, we track this in a spreadsheet, but every email that goes out, who it goes out, if a big email, I mean, is tracked. And people know that you cannot send a mass email to an Apparo audience without looking at that sheet and talking to your marketing team and making sure we're not bombarding folks. And consider the timing. Is this something informational? Is the call to action that you have very, very attractive? As the date gets closer, our policy is, we do one communication right at the end, even if one was just a couple days before it. But before that, maybe we're pacing it once every 2 weeks or so, starting about 6 weeks ahead is a rule of thumb that we tend to follow. And then you can also think about behavior-based triggers for communications. Someone comes to an event. Right away, you want to ask them to donate. For example, someone volunteers, maybe you want to ask them to donate right afterwards. So those are not built into campaigns with a start date and end date necessarily, but that's more of ongoing. So once you've identified your channels and thought about the timing, it's important to think about the language that you're going to use in each channel. And we talked about copywriting in general before, based on what you learned about your segments, their language, their motivators. This is the spot where you think metrics, heartstrings, testimonials, but this is about fine-tuning for a specific campaign. So I'll use an example again. If we're going back to that segment of the younger donors, the ones who volunteer, they want to have a really big impact, they're very active on Instagram. You're putting a campaign together, you're trying to get them to donate, right? Because they've been volunteers, you want them to donate. So you know that they're going to be motivated by Instagram. That's a spot where, you can be a little bit more informal. You can play around with video content here. It can be a little bit trickier to build in your call to action. So you may want to follow up with an email with an easy link, or use another social media channel where you also know they are with a direct link to your donate page. And then you're going to think about the language. Have you heard them say social good, lifting lives, impact, whatever it is, reflect that language back onto them, and tailor it as much as possible. And finally, with marketing plans and campaigns, how will you know if you did a good job? Why bother with these post-campaign efforts? I said this before, there's no rest in marketing. You take what you learn from one campaign, you tweak it, and you flesh out your next campaign. So it's important to define success and to measure success. Think about what metrics are relevant and figure out how you're going to track them. And this can also be hard. Google Analytics, I feel like, changes often. But that's a good spot for tracking conversions if you have paid ads. We use UTMs, which are that text at the end of that extra gobbledygooky text at the end of a URL. We have a really easy spreadsheet tool that we use for creating those. And then you can track where people came to a certain page in Google Analytics if you use those. And if anyone needs that, we could share that tool as well, Yenting. I can share that with you. And if anyone needs help using it, let me know. And feedback. It's important to get feedback. So you can use it for marketing purposes. So you will have metrics, quotes, but you may also learn some things that help you tweak some of your programs while you're doing it. So that was a lot. I've finished going through the 6 pieces. I just wanted to end with a little bit of low-hanging fruit. So maybe you're not quite ready to embark on these 6 things. Maybe you're going to dabble in them. And hey, if you don't do it in order, it's okay. But here are some really, and I'm not saying they're easy, but they're lower hanging fruit type things. They're little day-to-day things that you can do to feed fuel to the marketing fire. And the reason that you can do this is because you own these relationships. You are the front lines with your constituents. So if you have a marketing team, and even if you don't, if you have the marketing team, make the introductions. If you don't, do some of those one-on-one interviews yourself with constituents. Get the insights, get the impact stories, get the quotes, write them up, get them in your blog, get them on your website, make a graphic and share them on social media, and share them, forward them, engage on social media. We talked about asking people to be advocates. Ask them to be advocates, and ask them to follow you on social media. Encourage them to spread the word. Sometimes that's all they need. Send surveys. And also follow up with reminders. I think sometimes we think like, oh, I sent the survey, check. But, I don't know what your response rates are like. Ours are not sometimes so great. So sometimes reminders are really good. Just one simple reminder can help drive up some response rates. Collect, I mentioned this before, collect email addresses wherever you can. Help bolster your subscriptions, your email subscriptions, wherever you can, whether it's in person at an event with a piece of paper, whether it's a QR code on the wall, whether it's something that's required as part of registration for an event. Invite contacts to follow you on social media. So one of the things that we do at Apparo on LinkedIn is we sort of pass the hot potato. I don't know. We take turns putting people in the super admin level so that they can invite their contacts. And when they've finished inviting their contacts, I take them off as super admin and put another person on staff to invite their contacts. It really helps us grow our LinkedIn list. And grow your insights in any way you can. It doesn't have to be formal. Just as you're out and about, ask questions, listen actively, and just be a constant learner about your audience so that you can apply these tweaks. And so whether you are like marketing or still like marketing, I really do believe these tactics will help drive your mission forward. Thank you. And I think maybe we have time for a couple more questions if there are any more.
Yes. So this one is going back to the channels. So I'm doing digital marketing. I'd like to know, how does it play a role in a nonprofit marketing plan?
So I think digital marketing is a critical part of your planning. So what we tend to do is, I'll give an example. So we're about to embark on a new marketing plan for our volunteer appreciation award. So that award is going to have two phases. One phase is going to be, we need to grab all of your attention. We need nonprofits to nominate volunteers who've worked with them on an Apparo initiative. And then we need to attract the public broadly to vote. So we will think about, we think about our goals, and we think about all the channels that we have. And digital channels, digital marketing is a really important part of that. What are we going to do in social media? Do we have the budget? Is it appropriate to do something paid here? And we do experiment with that sometimes. Are we going to be able to track it? Is it going to, what's the investment? What's our anticipated return on that investment? I don't know. Help me out, Lauren and Alyssa. What other, I mean, we play around with a lot of different things, certainly on social media,
The
email.
newsletter, yes, the email newsletter.
Yeah, so that's our email newsletter is a regular channel that we have. We do try to minimize the number of like one-off emails we have and try to reuse our existing channels, but we still end up having one-off emails. But I do believe digital marketing is very important. And I would say social media and email marketing are the low-hanging fruit there, and hopefully can be done pretty inexpensively.
Going back to the insights collection, do you have any recommendations for how to delegate some of the insight collections to volunteers, or how to do this in the least time-intensive way for those of us who have primary development responsibilities?
So I do think surveys are a great tool for having it happen kind of on an automated fashion, having a balance of multiple choice and open-ended questions. And if you can motivate folks to do a survey, right, fill out this survey and get blank, whatever it is, something that you can afford, something that you can provide, maybe once a month you pull a name, something like that, to try to encourage that. So surveys are a great way to do it. I do think, depending on your volunteers, what a wonderful idea. We haven't done this, but couldn't one volunteer who's worked with you for a really long time run a volunteer focus group? Just bring together a group of volunteers. That's an audience they really understand if you need deeper insights into your volunteers. So I think a volunteer could certainly do that. They may be able to conduct some one-on-one interviews for you with other volunteers. I'm not sure I would let our volunteers go while talking to my donors, but I might if they were a seasoned donor, someone who's been with us for a long time and really understands us. Board members clearly really understand you, and they may be great for gaining insights into your donors via one-on-one conversations, or even bringing together a group of them. Those are a couple ideas that come to mind.
One of the responses, love the volunteer hosting a volunteer focus group. Thank you. There's a question on, please elaborate on UTMs, how they are used and how we can leverage it.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I don't have like a slide prepared on this, and the ability to leave my presentation and show you what I'm talking about. But for example, our URL for Apparo is www.apparo.org. But if I have a campaign where for some reason I'm trying to drive people to my homepage, which I probably wouldn't be, because I think for the most part, we're trying to drive you to a specific page. But anyway, a UTM is a way, you must see them all the time, all that long language afterwards where it says source equals something, medium equals something. Google Analytics can read this and does read it. So then when you come over to Google Analytics, I can look at the traffic on my homepage. I can sort it by source and medium and know that they came from a certain UTM. It stands for like Universal, I don't remember, Tag Manager. It's Universal Tag Manager. And that way you can track it. So let's say I'm doing, I have an article that I paid for to place in a digital publication. When I give them the link, I'm not just going to give them www.apparo.org. I'm going to give them that whole super long link. So when anyone clicks on it from that article, I'll know they came from that particular article. And we will send a follow-up tool and I'll write a couple sentences to go along with that on how to use that. And if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Bleema. We are at the 1 o'clock mark. So thank you all for joining us. We will be having our next session next Thursday. So please come join us then. Survey link is dropped in the chat. So please click on that before we close this out and complete those. Other than that, follow-up email will be sent, if not tomorrow, then definitely by Monday. So if you do have any additional questions for Bleema, feel free to respond to that. I'll be happy to shoot that over and we can collect that and send that back out. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us and have a good day. See you next week. Bye.